You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We are about to get started with our Training Thursday edition of the Cabral Concept. Looking forward to really building off of yesterday's show. I do hope that you tuned in on our Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday, where we talked about the real truth about fat loss and weight gain. And I let people know on that show that there is this misnomer that we actually add additional fat to our body. And remember, if you don't know about this concept, it's difficult for you to understand how to truly lose the weight and keep it off forever. So I do hope that you tune into yesterday's show. That was episode 1244. And today we are going to get into a new topic, which is essentially what is this deadly form of belly fat called visceral body fat. And we want to go over how to lose it, how to block it in the future. So I'm excited about today's topic because it goes deep into the world of overall nutrition and great exercise. So we know specifically that there are certain forms of exercise that burn this deeper form of belly fat off better than others. So we will explore that today. I'll go over other factors that create this visceral body fat and also why your chances of earlier mortality, earlier life death go up exponentially as you begin to increase this form of body fat, which is why we call it this deadly form of body fat. It literally leads to all of the main causes of death that we don't want to see, especially at a younger age. So let's dive right into it. Let's go over what is visceral body fat in general. So I don't know if you've heard of it before, but we really have two main types of body fat. I'll get into white fat versus, different types of fat versus brown fat versus how it gets burned and how it doesn't get burned in the future. All of that is not as important as looking at this from a macro-based level. Because as you're fine-tuning things, sure, fantastic, but the truth is this. Even if you never learn about it at such a deep level, you're going to be able to get the results that you want. But if you're a health practitioner, if you're someone that's getting into this expanding field of functional medicine, health, and wellness, we'll go deeper on that. Because I know there's a lot of naturopathic doctors, there's a lot of integrative health practitioners, acupuncturists, chiropractors, MDs, etc. listen to the show. And they don't teach these things in school, right? I mean, they don't teach everything. That's why when I offer once a month the integrative health practitioner course and certification, I'm trying to teach all of the things that you wouldn't get in school, that you need to go out there and learn from various certifications that they don't do under one roof. And that's all. I mean, all forms of education are amazing for the most part. It's just they're not complete. Like any one form by itself is simply not going to be complete. It's just not. So one thing that we take from exercise is this thought process of subcutaneous fat and visceral fat. And I want to explain the two because they're very different. Subcutaneous fat, the best way to think about it is this. It's right under the skin, okay? So this is body fats on your legs, your arms, like where your triceps are, those love handles, around your belly, under the armpits, a little bit around the chest. It is anywhere that you can pinch, okay? So subcutaneous body fat is actually pretty easy to see and pretty easy to be able to know where you're holding the most body fat. I mean, it really doesn't take someone with a body fat calipers like your local personal trainer or nutritionist, whoever might be certified to do that with you. Straightforward. However much you can pinch, the more subcutaneous body fat you have there. And we actually use it. Like when we do body fat caliper testing, we do that with all our body transformation clients in Boston. There's actually a 9-point system and a 3-point system. And we found over the years the 3-point system to be very close to the 9 points, and it's less invasive. So you can actually go right over your clothes, which is great. So it's better for privacy as well. For men, we're going to pinch right where the chest is. I have a whole episode on body fat testing if you want to look that up at stephencabral.com/podcast. You can do that. Okay, we'll try to link it up today as well. Today's stephencabral.com/1245. If we ever forget the link, you know how to search for it. Just stephencabral.com/podcast contains every show I've ever done. And so for men, what we do is we grab right around the top of the chest, right where the clavicle bone is, okay, the collarbone. Then we pinch about 1 inch beside the navel or the belly button, all right? And then we also pinch about midway between the iliac crest, which is the hip bone, and the kneecap, which is called your patella. So we just pinch that area right in the front of the quadricep, and we get those three totals. We add them up in terms of millimeters, and we find out on a chart where your body fat is. Super easy to do, super straightforward, and much better than weighing yourself alone. Okay, for women, what are we doing? Well, we're doing the tricep. Okay, we're doing the inner head, we'll call it, of the tricep, where women are going to hold more body fat. We also do right on top of the hip bone, okay, the suprailiac crest or suprailium, which is, again, just a different spot to do a skin fold caliper. This is called the Jackson-Pollock method. If you want to look it up online, you're welcome to as well. We provide you with the charts free on the podcast, and then we also do that mid-quad. Works really well. I mean, honestly, it's fantastic. And you can use, they're like $20, $19.95, I think, for like calipers. Really, really simple, straightforward. Okay. So we do that. Anyone can do it right at home. You can learn how to do it. You can watch a video. You can have your personal trainer do it. It's all great to look at that. Now, that's subcutaneous, meaning you could pinch it under the skin. Visceral body fat, though, and we'll get into why it's more dangerous. I'm going to actually link up an image if you haven't already seen it on Instagram or Facebook. It's going to show you that the visceral body fat can't be pinched. It's actually below, believe it or not, it is below a lot of the abdominal muscle, and it's intertwined and wrapped in with the organs, like your heart, all of the organs inside your body, your liver, right within that abdominal cavity. So you can't access it. You can push on it, and it will actually feel pretty solid. And that's why a lot of people don't know their true body fat. It's hard to look at for visceral body fat. I'll give you some estimates. Harvard University puts it at about 10% of total body fat, but that's not accurate. And I'll tell you why it's not accurate. We've done so many. Again, we've seen over 250,000 people. At least half of those are body transformation for sure. So here's the thing though. Men tend to carry a lot more visceral body fat, abdominal body fat, and looks more like a pot belly, we call it. So I remember growing up, my grandfather, he was pretty lean. He was probably somewhere around 6 feet tall, 5'11" or so, and lean arms, lean legs, fairly broad shoulders or so, and just a big pot belly. That's it. You couldn't pinch that pot belly. It was hard as a rock. And again, I'm saying this in a loving way. I really am. I love my grandfather. But that was visceral body fat, meaning like if he were to kind of bend forward, it wouldn't roll. A good sign of subcutaneous body fat is when you lean forward, it rolls over the pants, right? It kind of hangs over. Where visceral body fat won't. I mean, literally, it's hard. It's like a rock. And what happens is that builds up in the belly. Now, we'll give you reasons why it builds up, okay? So let's go over a couple other parameters, because to really find out your visceral body fat, you can say it's about 10% of your overall body fat, but there's different ways of looking at this. This is why it's so important. I did a whole podcast on waist to hip ratio. I know it's like a lot for a whole podcast, but it's worth it, because knowing your waist to hip ratio is so important. So important. It will tell you early warning signs for cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, gallbladder cancers. Really amazing to look at. And bottom line is this. Again, I have a whole podcast on how to do it. Waist hip ratio. We'll try to link it up at stephencabral.com/1245 for today's show. But also you can search it at stephencabral.com/podcast. Now, so when you do your waist hip ratio, men should be below 0.95. That's your ratio, right? All you're doing is taking the widest part of your waist, right around your belly button. And then you're going to stand with your feet about 3 inches apart, and you're going to take the widest part of your hips around your glutes, okay? Divide them. Do you get less than 0.95 for men? If you do, good. You're better in the clear. For women, below 0.8. Really important to look at that. So also a deciding factor and a lot of times why men get more heart disease. It's not the only reason, but it's a big one. Men do accumulate a lot more visceral body fat in that abdominal base region. Okay, so we know we want to look at that, but there's one more. And this is very simple and straightforward because you're already going to be taking your waist measurement for a waist-hip ratio. So you might as well get the total measurement. Now, again, this is Harvard University. They say men keep that waist below 40 inches. It's 102 centimeters. But the truth is this. Your waist ratio for men really has to be below 36. 36 inches or below. That's the real number. Now, of course, like disease and obesity goes up dramatically over 40 inches, but we don't want to wait for that. So 36 inches and below for men. Again, I understand it's going to vary based on the size of the human being. If you are 6'4", 6'5", it's hard as a guy to have a 28-inch waist. Probably not going to make a lot of sense. I don't even think that might even be physically possible with your rib cavity size as well as your hips. But we can also look at it as, no matter what, keep that waist below 36 inches for men. And women, ideally 32, 33 inches maximum. And again, we know for obesity-wise, 89 centimeters or 35 inches. So men, no more than 40, ideally 36 or less. Women, no more than 35, ideally less than 33 or 32 inches maximum. Okay, so this is important to look at that. So we have body fat. We know that for men, 18 to 22% maximum. Sorry, that's for women. Women, 18 to 22% is what we're looking for. Men, we're looking for 14 to 18%. And again, I have the breakdowns of what's athletic considered, what's not. Check out the shows on body fat percentage. Okay, but again, rundown, men, waist-hip ratio, 0.95 or less. Okay, waist, 36 inches or less. And body fat, between 14 and 18%. You're golden. Women, let's take it from the top, 0.8 or less for their waist-hip ratio, 32, 33 inches for their total waist measurement, and then for their body fat percentage, 18 to 22%. It's gold standard. It really is. And all of these at least take one part of their measurement from the waist because that's what we're looking at for this deadly body fat. If you want to live a long, healthy life with less inflammation, less chance for higher levels of estrogen, internally produced and otherwise, we need to make sure that we have a smaller waist. This is not about vanity. You don't have to have six-pack abs. I'm like over that. I'm over that whole phase. I really am. It's nice to be lean. You don't need to have six-pack abs to be healthy. And a lot of times, you might be less healthier with them. You have less reserves. You might be over-exercising to get there. You might be under-carbing. We're going to make that our new term. Under-carbing to get there as well. But again, it's great to have abs. It really is. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with it at all. But what do you do when you get them? Is it healthy? That's just what you have to ask yourself. And if the answer is yes, keep on keeping on. But if the answer is no, that you are really running yourself down and depleting yourself, ask yourself, is it worth it? Can you have a flat stomach but not be able to count all 6 of your abs? That's something for you to decide. I mean, it really is. I'm not going to make that choice for anyone. But this is not about vanity. It's about being healthy, and it's about maintaining a small waist-hip ratio. Super important. Okay, because why? Well, let's go over why. Just a quick recap again. So I have this I'm going to give you a couple images for the podcast page because, the body fat, on visceral body fat, it's shown as yellow. Believe it or not, I'll see if I can find a few organ-based photos that I have from my medical textbooks. You can see the heart wrapped in this yellowish fat. It is disturbing. And that's visceral body fat, okay? It wraps around the organs. Not easy to get rid of, not ideal, but we can tell you how to do it. Okay, so in terms of being able, what does it lead to? Let's go with what visceral body fat leads to. The reason why we call it the deadly body fat is that it increases heart attacks, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, colon cancer, gallbladder issues, breast cancers, and Alzheimer's disease. So, when you look at those, and you're looking at cardiovascular, blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, and cancer, you're really talking about all of the major things that cause earlier in life mortality, meaning you don't get to live that long, healthy life. And most likely, you're medicated and feeling terrible for 20 years or so. I mean, it's not the way to live. It's not. That's the crime in all of this, is that there is a way to reverse all of this. There honestly is. It's maintaining a healthy body fat. And I could have used this for a Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday show, but we need to move our bodies. It's one of the key factors in being able to metabolize carbohydrates, being able to sleep better, which factors into blood sugar, being able to reduce stress. We have to move our bodies. And that means we need 30 minutes of exercise most days a week. And one thing I have to mention that may not be that popular, but that's okay, I'll deal with that, is that walking is not exercise. It's a great form of introductory exercise for those people that might have myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue-based syndrome, where they're worn down. I understand that. Absolutely, that's appropriate. But you're on a health-based program. But it's not a weight loss-based program. So, walking is fantastic. But I call it normal human movement. You're supposed to walk. Like, you have two legs that was meant to do walking. But the manual labor that we used to do has to be mimicked by something. And we're doing that now with an exercise program more days than not. Well, what's more days than not? 4 days a week, I would estimate. So 4 days a week, I've always seen to be the gold standard in an exercise program. You can get away with 3, but 4, that's really where it's at. It really is. That's the number. Because if you do 4 days a week, you never have more than 2 days off in a row. You can work it so that you never have more than 1 day off in a row, which is ideal. So you could do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then pick the day to exercise where you're going to have the cheat meal that night. It's the best way to do it. It really is. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to do a cheat meal Saturday night. Good. I'll do my workout Saturday. Why Saturday, not Sunday? Because your body will then be depleted of a lot of glycogen from your workout, which means that you are, before it's ever added as body fat, and if you listen to yesterday's show, you'll know how it's added, you'll actually replenish your glycogen stores first, which means when you eat that dessert, it actually doesn't turn to body fat right away, if at all. It goes to replenish glycogen stores. So that's why again, you can use science to lose weight. And that's really what we're trying to do, help people, but also put it in real world speak. So that's what we want to do. Now, let's talk about what the research actually says to what the best form is of exercise in order to remove this deep belly fat. Because honestly, this deadly body fat is all around the belly area. And the larger the stomach, the larger the waist, most likely, the more visceral body fat. All right, well, here's the nice thing. I mentioned it probably 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. It was time to bring it back on the podcast. Okay, we know that one of the most time-efficient ways to burn belly fat, and this includes the visceral body fat, is through high-intensity interval training, which is why you can get a traditional workout that would take 40 to 60 minutes done in 20 to 30 minutes. And that's because of doing intervals at 90% of whatever your max is. And your max can actually change based on your level of fitness. So in the beginning, expect your max to be a little less. That's okay. After 12 weeks from going untrained to trained, it will improve. You will obviously improve. So it's a great thing to look at. This is a very short summary of the study, and it's pretty surprising. So I want to read it to you and then just give you the outline of really what it means. So let's go over this. I'll link this up, of course. This is a PubMed study. So this is actually published as conventional medicine. I always like to mention that because, most people in the West considers science from a conventional medicine standpoint to be the gold standard. Don't know if I'm in that same camp, but I don't disagree with it, meaning that I agree that the studies are what they are. So let's go over this. Okay, looking at articles on high-intensity interval training and fat mass. So what was done is we looked at the nature of high-intensity interval training, cycling versus running versus targeted intensity. It looked at male-female, looked at body weight, looked at it measuring body composition. And let's see what we found. High-intensity interval training, which means, let's say you do a sprint for a minute and then rest for 3 minutes. sprint for a minute, rest for 3 minutes, or sprint for 20 seconds, rest for 40 seconds. And you repeat that 5 to 10 times. That would be high intensity interval training. You can do it with resistance training. You can do it with running. You can do it biking. You can do it however you want, as long as you get that heart rate up there. Okay, so check this out. High intensity interval training significantly reduced total abdominal and visceral fat mass with no differences between the sexes. A comparison showed that running was more effective than cycling in reducing total and visceral fat mass. So let me stop there for 1 second. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Standing on your 2 legs and sprinting is the most effective way to burn body fat. And I always hypothesized this, but never had the data. But now the data is coming out. This study was published in 2018, February, in a Journal of Sports Medicine. So here's the thing. I thought to myself, where do I see my clients get the best results? Well, I see them as athletes on the field sprinting. I don't see it necessarily in the gym on a bike. Now, it works. Don't get me wrong. It works. I do the upright bike, okay? But I do some upright running, sprinting as well. Why would it work? You have to look at the biomechanics when you're doing an exercise. The reason why we help clients in Boston, and again, I put all of this in a book for A Man's Guide to Muscle and Strength, which, by the way, is for women too. It's just the publisher decided that was the best name. The way that you get the best results when you're looking for overall body transformation, I'm not talking about fine-tuning, is you work the most amount of muscle at any one given time. So it's actually very simple from a common sense standpoint. If I get someone doing an exercise that works more muscle than another exercise, I'm most likely going to burn more body fat and get better results. So then we came up with studies and we saw, sitting down on a machine works a minimum of 30% less muscle fiber than doing that same exercise standing. And the reason is you are going to then, from an open chain to a closed chain exercise, just means feet are grounded, that's the end point, and you're engaging more of your core muscles. Well, think about it. When you're running, you are pumping your arms, you are actually using your abdominal muscles and obliques to a greater degree. Why? Because there's actually counterbalance going on as your body shifts in and out of the transverse plane. And check out, I did a podcast a long time ago called The 3 Planes of Exercise. Transverse is just when you're rotating. Well, when you're running, you're actually resisting rotation. And you work your obliques and abdominal muscles to a much greater degree than when you're seated biking. Now, again, I love upright biking. I think it's great. I think spin classes are great for the right person. But if you're talking about what's going to burn the most, hands down, it's going to be stand-up sprinting or standing up running. Now, I don't believe in long-distance running because of what it does to the overall repetitive motion damage on the joints. I've just seen it for too long in my practice. But I'm not denying that shorter distance running, which is what I like to do, I don't actually like it, but I do it, or sprinting, which is just phenomenal, that I do love, is just great for the body. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's what we're meant to do. We have long, strong Achilles tendons. The glutes, gluteus maximus, are the largest muscles in our body. We're meant to be pretty good sprinters, not for a long distance though. We're talking like 20 seconds to 60 seconds, 90 seconds all out. That's what the human body can do. That's it. Run after something or run away from something. That's it. If you didn't get away within 60 to 90 seconds, it wasn't good. There wasn't a happy ending to that, right? So that's what we want to look at. All right, but again, it does not mean that you can't do upright bike or spin. It works. I'm just giving you what works based on the science, though. What works the highest level. All right. High intensity, above 90% peak heart rate training was more successful in reducing whole body adiposity, while lower intensities had a greater effect on changes in abdominal visceral fat mass. I want to break that down in 1 second. Our analysis also indicated that only computed tomography scan or magnetic resonance imaging showed significant abdominal and or visceral fat mass loss after HIIT intervention, high intensity interventions. Okay, so let me break that down. Don't worry about the tomography or the MRIs, right? Magnetic resonance imaging. So here's the thing though. That's the way that you really tell how much visceral body fat you have. Does that matter? Do you need to go in for fancy scans? You can, but in my opinion, reduce the weight to step ratio, reduce the waist circumference, lower your body fat. You're going to be good. Okay, so I want to see if you caught that though. It was that high intensity interval training was better at reducing whole body adiposity. That means body fat over the whole body, arms, legs, and torso with the abdominal area. But lower intensities had a greater effect on changes in abdominal and visceral fat mass. Pretty amazing, right? So like brisk walking, maybe a little bit lighter of a jog, or highs, but then definitely a period of some longer lows. And when I look back to it, bodybuilders have been doing this for, 100 years? What do? They wake up and they do fasted cardio. Not sprints. They do fasted cardio. And it's usually walking, sometimes walking on an incline. And they do that for like 30 minutes to 60 minutes. Bodybuilders, like it or not, you may or may not like how their physiques look, but they know how to transform their physiques. So when I first got into body transformation, I was into natural bodybuilding. What did I do? Natural bodybuilding-based programs and nutrition with my clients, and it worked. I still take those principles today, but I just make them healthier for the long run as well. So what I want to share with you is this, and I know that I'm going long on this podcast, but it's this, is that there's actually one more point I have to give you, is that stress can also increase visceral body fat because of how it increases cortisol. So it's an important one to look at. Blood sugar, cortisol, inflammation. I did a whole video on this at stephencabral.com/BRMI. Is that correct? Let me see if that's correct. It should be stephencabral.com/BRMI. Let's see if that works. And yes, it does. That shows you the link between stress, blood sugar, inflammation, and weight gain. I won't talk about that today, but I recommend watching that video because it explains the connection of why stress can raise blood sugar, which can raise visceral body fat or body fat in general. Important to look at that, in my opinion. Really important to look at that. Okay, so here's the thing, though. This is why I did today's podcast. There is no one best form of exercise. There is no one absolute perfect diet. What works is what I talk about in my book, The Rain Barrel Effect, which is a de-stress protocol that you work on diet, exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, rest in the parasympathetic. You work on the emotional balance, which will include sleep, being able to sleep at night, getting rid of anxiety and overwhelm. You work on good quality nutritional supplements to make sure your body has everything that it needs in order to function at the top level and remove the toxins that shouldn't be there. And then there's the success mindset to understand that if you're trying to transform your body or achieve any goal, it's not going to happen overnight. So when it doesn't happen overnight, or even on day 10, are you willing to stick with it? You have to have that success mindset. So I just invite you today to understand that you want to include some interval training, some cardio, some resistance training, and daily walking of 10,000 steps. Hopefully today's podcast was helpful. Remember, you can and will transform your body with the knowledge that it is not simply doing one thing one time and then it's just going to stick. You want to work on reducing stress, getting that good sleep, doing a functional medicine detox, getting your 10,000 steps per day, working out for 30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes, more days than not. And all of these things are literally what work. And I know we're always looking for the silver bullet. We're always looking for the next fad, whatever that thing is. Believe me, I understand. Like, I'm part of that as well. Like, hey, oh, this looks interesting. This looks new. Because all of us have that shiny object syndrome. It's like, oh, what's this over here? And believe me, I'm part of that as well. I really am. So what I want you to look back on, though, is that the core principles, the foundations of how to get your body healthy and being lean, staying in great shape, and living a long, healthy life are always going to be the same. Maybe we find new studies, just like I've been reading you right now and over the past week. But the fundamentals that we've been doing for hundreds of years with the natural hygienists, traditional naturopathy, and now in the naturopathic doctoral degrees in functional medicine and all of the advanced integrative health practitioner certifications we have now, only build upon those foundations. It really is. That's what we're doing. We're building upon them, but it never changes them. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope this was helpful. Please do feel free to pass this show along to anyone else you believe it will serve. Take care, everyone. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only 2 ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science. Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stephencabral.com/rainbarrel.